Dallin had his company. He and his partner came and met with me in the golf house. And so we talked about, and I'm sad I didn't invest in his company because Dallin's been hugely successful. He was the founder, chairman, and president of how do you say that? Tolero, because I compete against a company called Toleo, a privately held company focused on the discovery of novel targets and therapeutics for cancer and other serious human diseases. He's actually doing something very, very valuable out there in the world. In 2003, he founded Montagen Pharmaceuticals, a privately held drug discovery and development company focused on oncology, where he served as chairman, president, and CEO, and sold it in 2006. So that's a nice exit. So my big mistake was not listening to Dallin better and writing him a big check in 2003, because I would have had a nice exit in 2006. So we all make mistakes, but he has been a strategy consultant at McKinsey & Company, Entrepreneur of the Year in the state of Utah, one of the V100 top leaders in the state, Utah Business Magazine's top 40 under 40. He's a mover and a shaker. Don't you also have some degree from Harvard?
MBA from Harvard, but my real degree is my accounting degree from here at the Marion School.
There we go. Thank you.
I even have my cougar blue socks on.
Nice.
I'm blue all the way.
Or is that Utah State blue?
No, I think they're wearing black.
Are they? Okay.
This is cougar blue, the old school cougar blue.
Yes, thank you.
Back in the day. You can tell how old we are now. So.
And it's interesting, Fred wore his blue shirt, and our other panelist, Tom, I don't know Tom as well as Fred and Dallin, but also in blue, so we appreciate that. I'm the one who blew it. I've known Fred for years, but he graduated in 1981 from BYU and went to work for one of the world's largest real estate construction companies in the San Francisco Bay Area called Bechtel. Did you work with Steve White up there and that whole team? And you know, Georgia White is now my neighbor down here in Provo.
Really?
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
I swing by and see her hit some balls and see Georgia.
And go see Georgia. What you really want to see Georgia for, Georgia White, Steve White was president of Bechtel in the Bay Area, and Steve and Georgia bought a home on Pebble Beach years ago, and so they're right on the intersection of 14 and 15, so you should go see them there. But he's run a very, very successful real estate investment company for years in Southern California called Glenwood, based in Glendale, California. And they've had just a multitude of successes and challenges that he might share with you from 2008 to 2012 as that real estate bubble cratered and had some challenges, but has now become a peer CEO and chairman of a group called, the advisory group called Vistage International, 17,000 members globally, and he'll tell you about his experience with advisory boards and the like with that. Finally, Tom Karen has a very distinguished career. He's actually one of the smart guys on the panel. He actually has a degree in computer science, 1996, 1994, BYU. 96, computer science. We're always looking for the smart people. So, advice to you as students, find a place in your discipline where you can distinguish yourself from anybody else. And often that relates to getting a technical degree and that sort of thing. That is always just a major asset. Tom, let's see, early in Tom's career, I've got it all here. He started a company in 1998 called Wingate Web and sold to Active Network in 2007. So again, another exit there. And he worked for the Active Network for a period of time, but then moved on to more interesting opportunities. Most recently, Tom has been the CEO, founder of Moki Mobility, which is a company to help businesses do disruptive and innovative things with tablets and smartphones. He's a smart guy. He's involved in a market that's emerging, a strong market, and you always want to look for one of those. So it's a great team, and we appreciate that. Let me just start out by saying, you know, we've talked about management teams and advisory boards, and today what we'll do is we'll talk about management teams. I'll ask the panelists a series questions about organizing, building, and incentivizing management teams. We'll also talk about advisory boards. I want to make clear up front, we're talking about advisory boards here that are not necessarily fiduciary advisory boards. Just so you know, I get asked to sit on boards of directors with fair frequency. My first question is it the board of directors, or is it just an advisory board? Because there's a big difference. An advisory board is a role where you might take some equity in a company, but you're not a fiduciary. In other words, you're not a regular member of their board of directors. And so you're not liable in case the company gets sued, et cetera. So someone comes to me and says, hey, would you be on my advisory board? I seriously consider it. Boards of directors where you have fiduciary responsibilities and liabilities that could be imposed later is something that we all take more seriously these days. And so we're going to be talking more about the advisory board kinds of roles. We've gone through the bios. Yeah. Anyway, some of you probably know me. If you don't, come look at my LinkedIn profile. The one good thing that's happened to me will happen a week from today. I'm being inducted into the Utah Technology Hall of Fame. So that's an accomplishment, I guess. And I'm not a technologist. That's the odd thing. I'm a lawyer by training. I was general counsel at Novell for 15 years. But the last 13 years, I've been involved in a number of startups and companies that have seen successes and so forth. So I know a little bit about general management and technology companies. I thought I'd just start out, and why don't you start, Tom, and just give us your 2 minutes on management teams and advisory boards and your philosophy, and then we'll go to Fred and Dallin.
Okay, well, my experience is more with management teams than advisory boards. I have run advisory boards, and I'm currently putting together 2 advisory boards for my current business. I'll maybe defer to my esteemed panelists for more information about advisory boards. So my management experience has been primarily as an executive in 3 companies, and also as a general manager running divisions of larger companies. So I've seen businesses from, the startup, the early days when we're trying to figure out what is it that we do here and how are we going to make money, all the way through, market validation and market domination. And I can tell you that there are different management teams, I think, that are needed for different phases of the business. And one of the kind of points that I would probably bring up today is that sometimes individuals in businesses are there during a certain time and they're not there at other times. Certain management teams that I have worked with have been really good during certain phases of the business, and then maybe somebody on my management team doesn't scale. I also think sometimes there's issues putting people on your team who may be better for later stage, and you've got them on your team too early. So it's not always just a question of somebody's skills or somebody's passion. Sometimes you have to optimize your management team for the phase of your business. And one of the things that I really believe is that it's really important for you to consider the stage of your business when you put your team together. And you have to be willing to make hard choices and changes. You need to be willing to step down. You need to be willing to trade your team out when things scale, if that happens. And maybe we'll have some questions along those lines today. But those are some of the things I've experienced. Changes to management teams as the business scales has been one of the things that's been the most challenging for me.
Thank you.
My background is, when I started my first company, I thought I was a pretty smart guy and knew it all, so I didn't need any help. And I realized very shortly thereafter that I really wasn't very smart and I needed a lot of help. And so that was where I really got involved with advisory boards. And so I've spent a lot of time serving on both fiduciary boards and advisory boards. And so I just want to take a second, segue just a second off of what David said about advisory boards. When you have a fiduciary board, you will represent the shareholders. And you have authority to fire the CEO. The CEO reports to you, and you have the authority to fire that CEO. So as a CEO, if you have a fiduciary board, you're working now for the board because they're representing the shareholders. Now, CEO may own the majority of the company, and it's a little more difficult to get rid of them that way, but on an advisory board, the advisory board is there to advise the CEO. He's simply there to give you advice and help. And so there is no authority. And I found that when you put together an advisory board, and I'm just going to kind of use Tom's example as to work, just an idea to put in your minds to start with, is that most people, when they put together advisory boards, they look for friends, or they look for family, or they look for somebody like that. But when you start a board, an advisory board, you need people that can help you make tough choices. And a lot of times, friends and families are not good members of an advisory board because they're too close. And so just as an advice, when you go down that road, and if we wanted to go down that, we can talk about it. But I found that having advisory boards, and when I started the company, then I got involved having an advisory board, and they were very helpful in helping me basically not step on any landmines and blow myself up. They became a really great source of information. I don't know how many of you have read Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. It's an old-time book. But one of the main points of his book is that having that mastermind group. And that's what an advisory board does. They're a mastermind group where you can go to and pick their brains and get guidance and direction.
Thanks. Before I jump in, I have a couple comments on advisory boards as well, but the funny thing, I want to come back to this golf shop experience. This is the first time I had met Dave, and a pretty intimidating guy. Go look up his bio when we're done here. But at the time, I'm just a fresh kid out of B school, and we're playing golf in his golf house, and my first swing, I have a pretty hard swing, no talent, just willing to really go at the ball. Club head flies, literally broke the club head off the club, and it goes flying, fortunately, into the screen, not through the screen, because that could have been a few $1,000s.
Right.
But yeah, that was my introduction to Dave. I was extremely embarrassed. I went
I
and messed
wasn't
up his
going to
golf
talk about that part. He has a fine golf swing.
The good news is I was able to find that club on eBay.
That's
I think,
right.
and
Yeah.
but it was an old club. But anyway, that was a fun experience in the golf house. The other thing I wanted to mention is can't remember what it was. Oh, it was Dave did pass on the opportunity to invest in Montagen, which was a cancer drug development company that we'd started a few years ago. But the good news, David, is we're raising a Series B for Tolero,
Okay.
so you have a chance at redemption, and we'll be happy to take your investment.
Okay.
So a couple. He's kind of backed himself into a corner now, hasn't he?
Get my checkbook out. Do you take $10? Yeah.
Well, we could lower the minimum for you, Dave.
Right,
Maybe we'll
okay.
put you on the advisory board. So, two quick things. First is, when it comes to management teams, here's my mantra, and I probably say this once a month for the last 10 years. The biggest and most important decision that I make as a leader in my company is what business to be in. And it has a lot of facets and all that. But the second most important decision that I make every day, and that I've been thinking about for 10 years, is who to be in business with. So to me, this is the most critical decision behind, what is the actual business opportunity. Who to be in business with is the most impactful variable for your success or failure, in my opinion. And since we're focusing on SABs, I'll leave that for now and just make two comments about SABs, or advisory boards, I'm sorry. I call it an SAB because I work in a field that's primarily science-driven. So we have at our company, we have a board of directors that does govern the company. The CEO reports to the board. And as David mentioned, they do have a fiduciary responsibility. I have a very close friend who was a board member at a up-and-coming biotech firm, didn't do anything wrong, got sued because they have fiduciary and oversight responsibilities to lead and manage the company appropriately and in the best interest of the shareholders. So we have our board of directors. We also have an advisory board that is on the business side that I speak with frequently. It includes 2 business school professors that I had that are focused on the healthcare space. And in addition to that, with our company, we've split that advisory board, and we have a scientific advisory board as well that is comprised just of key luminaries and opinion leaders on the specific scientific disciplines that we're focused on. So the SABs have been tremendously helpful to us in the past over the course of my career, and I think the advisors that have worked with us have done pretty well too. They've guided the ship well, given us some good advice, and in exchange we typically give them stock options, and I think with our first company, a couple of our SAB members paid off their homes and did quite well just for giving a little advice, direction, and opening a few doors for the company.
It's crazy. I was on the original advisory board for Omniture, and a couple of years later, darned if I didn't get a check in the mail for $250,000. It was like crazy. So I thank Josh James and John Pastana for having started that company and helped me, pay for one of the homes, or the golf house. Paid for the golf house. So thank you. I think those are wise comments. I noted a couple of comments. You mentioned, Alan, that the most important decisions you make are kind of what decision, what business do I want to be in, et cetera, et cetera. There was a book, actually, I read over last Christmas holiday called The 17 Most Important Business Decisions Ever Made, right? And the author points out, in fact, it's Jim Collins who writes the foreword to the book, and he asserts that the most important business decisions ever made are not what decisions, but who decisions. And he refers back to when Lou Gerstner got hired by IBM and completely changed the way IBM was operating and made that company, again, very, very successful. That was a who decision. Think of what happened at Apple in 1996. Who did they rehire after firing him in 1989? Steve Jobs. Again, a who decision. So who decisions are very, very important to Dallin's point. And to what Fred was talking about, when you get an advisory board, make sure they're industry experts, right? There's a book called Blueprint to a Billion. And in that book, the author, can't remember his name right now, Blueprint to a Billion, they talk about the 7 characteristics of companies that have become billion-dollar companies. And one of the things that the author writes in there is he talks about boards, and he says that the blueprint to a billion companies are companies that put industry experts on their board as opposed to friends or financiers. So often in our world, you get these venture capitalists that come on your board early on. Get them off as fast as you possibly can. Bring in industry experts into your boards and advisory boards. So let me just start out. Dallin, I'll ask you. We'll ask some questions about management team. We'll get started on that. What's the biggest mistake you've ever made when hiring a senior manager, and what did you do about it?
That's a great question. I think on a positive side, I've been very fortunate that the business partner that I've been involved in business with for the past 12 years, since really completing my graduate education, is a world-class human being, a world-class scientist, and a pretty good business mind as well. And that's really formed the basis for success, as well as a positive relationship, and just not pulling what little hair I still have left out every day. But probably the biggest mistake that I've made.
You don't have to give their names or their titles.
Oh, shoot! This was my chance to get even, really make myself feel better about the pain. No, there have been a few times. I think it's very difficult to not mishire, and I can't think of a particular instance that stands out more than the rest, other than to say that those experiences have cost us tremendously, not just monetarily. It goes far beyond the costs of training and hiring a new person, the lost morale, the lost time, the poison in the well, so to speak.
Right.
All at the end of the day, for me, those mistakes have been the biggest mistakes I've made are people mistakes, and have cost the company the most and are the hardest to recover from, particularly when it begins to negatively impact the culture of your company. And the higher level, the more senior the person, the bigger their influence and the bigger the challenge. In most of these situations, what I've done about it doesn't do any good to avoid the issue. My style with these types of things is to recognize what's happened and put it on the table, have a very formal, well-documented, and kind but direct conversation with the individual. And in my mind, there's a point where if it's more than if it's a performance issue, you can work on that. But if it's a personality, a motivation issue, a character issue, those issues tend to not be resolved very well. And it's my thinking that once you get to a certain point, the relationship probably needs to move on in order for the good of both parties.
Fred, Tom, Tom may have some comments, but I would just add, in the instances where we've had to make senior management changes, I always have looked back and said, I probably didn't move quickly enough. Thoughts on that or other thoughts?
Yeah, so a few thoughts. I think that, if you're an entrepreneur, or even at some times when you're the CEO, you have the ability to choose your team. Now, there are some cases when you get hired as the CEO and you don't necessarily get to choose your team. But if you're in a startup or you're in an early stage company, you can choose your team. So on the positive side of this, I believe that you want to try to find people, obviously, who have skills and passion, but if possible, people that you have either worked with before or you know what their work style is. It is a well-known thing that if teams that have worked together before have the ability to push on each other a little harder than teams that have not worked together before. And the executive team does have to push on each other a little bit. And you need to not just surround yourself with people that help you, but also with people that are willing to challenge you. I would say that probably the biggest mistake that I have made, not just with the management team, but with teams in general, is waiting too long to make a change. There are all these personal considerations. Sometimes in business, you don't want to replace someone because you know you're going to lose some momentum. I recently made some changes in my business where I felt like if we let this person go, we might lose some critical momentum at a critical time. But if you wait too long, you just prolong the problem. It doesn't do anyone any favors. You've got to get separated when you know the time is right to do it. And it helps the person that you separate from, too. They can move on to find something that they might be more compatible with.
Absolutely. Fred, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I'd like to kind of come down a little bit to a level that perhaps some of you are looking at if you're looking at starting a company or just started a company. I found that as you look at your hires, your next hires in your company, I want, if you were to draw a box with the matrices being good at what they do and like what they're doing, is to find people who are good at what they're doing and like what they're doing. Because the reason you're hiring them is because you don't. You either are good at what you're doing but you don't like it, or you like what you're doing and you're not good at it. And either way, it's going to lead you not to success. And so find people who are good at what they're doing and really love what they're going to do. Second one is whoever you're going to work with, you're going to spend a lot of time with that person. So make sure you're going to enjoy being around them. They don't have to be your buddy, but they have to be people that you can get along with. And probably that was, in my mind, that was one of the biggest mistakes I made, is I hired somebody because they were incredibly qualified, but as we got down into the relationship in a few weeks, we recognized we just couldn't work with each other, and we both needed to go a different direction.
One more comment, as I've had a minute to reflect on this. I would like to share a very quick example, but when I started my first company after business school, it was actually the company we'd approached David about funding. I was fresh out of MBA school, had some experience, spent some time at McKinsey and Intel, but this was a cancer drug development focused company, was not my background. And we came in contact with an individual that was at the time the CEO of a medical device company in Salt Lake City. So it wasn't cancer drug development, but it was healthcare and device related. And there was some, this individual had committed some seed capital, $1 million of seed capital to the company, and it was in the early stages of the company. So we're still forming the full team and raising capital. And it was proposed that this individual might be a better leader for the company in its early stages. And so we looked at that, and I offered to resign as CEO, have this person come in as CEO, recognizing that the experience level was higher. And the mistake in that was we went ahead and did that, and we altered the capital structure. My founding partner and I at the time had owned 50% less sum that we'd set aside for an option pool to attract and retain people. And we redid that and went a third, a third, a third. And this individual basically jerked us around for 6 months, did not perform, never put in a dime of money, and really didn't do any work. And so really put us in a difficult position. If you find yourself in that position, it's very important to move quickly, as has been discussed, but also to get a full settlement and release from those types of individuals, especially if it's an early stage company. So the reason I thought it was important to highlight this is we're in an entrepreneurial conference, and one thing that happens frequently, even if you just have some casual conversations with individuals that somehow feel they're involved from the beginning, they can come back later and make a claim, assert a claim that they helped get the company going, that they have some sort of a claim on some of the equity or the assets. And this never happens until after you're wildly successful. And then
Right.
It's the Winklevoss twins, right? That was my idea, and it doesn't matter who executed on it because
Those are the guys that
I
found
said
it
the
or
word.
had the idea to start Facebook, right?
Yeah. So in order to avoid a forgotten founder claim down the road or a lot of legal issues, we actually, not only did this person cost us literally several hundred thousands of dollars and almost sunk the company, we had to pay several $1,000s in exchange for a release of future claims. So again, important to handle those items quickly and also get a full legal release and make sure you have a signed document.
Good advice. Let's pause there and see if there are any questions at this point from the audience right here. Yeah.
I'm curious, why didn't you do a vesting schedule with any of the partners there?
That's a great question. So we actually vest always, and that's the number one rule, except for, my business partner and I, we said, we'll vest if the venture capital groups force us to, ex post facto, but we felt like we didn't want to re-earn our own equity in our own company. And that detail just kind of got negotiated, as we brought in this third individual. Had it been more arm's length and not so familiar, we would have done that, but it became kind of a buddy-buddy situation. Conversations were happening over a round of golf, and all of a sudden we had lost the negotiating ability to kind of say, hey, you got to earn this, we're going to vest it to protect the company. It became awkward to do that. But again, that was a rule that I violated that I should not have violated. We should always just vest everybody, and that protects, even now with this company, I'm vesting, my business partner's investing, even though collectively we own about 80% of the company currently. You just never know if things happen, and people have challenges, and we have buy-sell agreements too, where if my business partner stopped performing or had some kind of a challenge or just decided, hey, I'm going to go, to Alaska and ice fish for 20 years, there needs to be a mechanism to continue to operate the business and get that person out of the way so that they're not debilitating the business. And investing is a way to do that and should always be adhered to.
Just for you that may not understand some of those concepts, many of you do, I'm sure, but when founders start a company, such as Dallin and his partner started Monogen, right, they typically have equity, right, in the company. They own the capital structure of the company, et cetera. When you bring in somebody new, you sign them up to a vesting schedule. We promise to give you 10% of the company, but you don't get it all now. You're going to get it 10% per year over the next 10 years. Or very typically in the tech world, it's 25% per year over the next 4 years so that they can earn out that 10% of the company that they might want to own.
Thanks, David. Maybe I could just share a personal experience on vesting a little bit.
Yeah.
So I've done 3 companies, and this latest one, Moki Mobility, luckily I had some exits. I sold my first business for a significant amount of money. And so I self-funded this company for almost 3 years with my business partner, my co-founder. And so we owned 90% of the company. We put several $1 million into it. And then we started to grow our management team and bring other people in. We recently announced a Series A financing round for $6.6 million this week, in fact. And one of the things I think would be really great for student entrepreneurs to understand is you need to be willing to vest. So this company, I funded it. I was the angel, right? And now that I have a Series A VC investors, I'm on a vesting schedule. And I'm willing to do that. Now, some of my equity is not vesting, right? I deserve to have some of that
Well, yeah,
ownership.
you had some
But,
basic,
You know, the question during the
100%.
negotiation of the funding process was, is this executive team willing to have some vesting even though they really own this business,
right?
right? So we were willing to do that because we believe that everybody should be vesting. You kind of have this concept of must be present to win, right?
Right.
And so I believe that an entrepreneur that bootstraps his business, that pays his way into his business, shouldn't feel entitled to owning his business unless there's some exit, right? If there's an exit, then you had your win.
Right.
But if the stockholders and the other fiduciaries have not had an exit, just because you started it doesn't mean that you get to have your exit without being there.
Right.
That's what I believe. You need to have some vesting.
Who came in on your Series A? Was it an institution?
So my Series A was led by Paleon Ventures.
Oh, sure.
And with Allegis as well, and Epic, where all 3 of those were involved.
Oh,
And then we also had Plus 550 involved in our Series A.
sure. Congratulations.
On the Series A, 6.6, our seed was 2.1, so we've raised just under $9 million this year, and we're all vesting. So
Congratulations. That's great.
vesting happens. Be ready for it.
Other questions on that subject? If not, name a superstar performer that you brought on your team, and how did you go about recruiting that person and then structuring a package or situation that fit them perfectly? Tom, you want to just dive in there?
Has anybody here heard of the expedition that Shackleton led to the Antarctic
Sure.
way back in the day with his ship, the Endurance? One way that we recruit people is to tell them that it's going to be a dangerous expedition with some possibility of failure or near-death experiences and low pay. Seriously, when we recruit people to our team, we're looking for the star performers who aren't in it for the now. Maybe they're in it for where the business can go later. So we don't offer extremely high pay for executives. We don't offer a cushy landing spot for anyone. We're looking for passionate, skilled, hungry people who've caught the vision, who want to participate, and the majority of the rewards are for later. We certainly want to take care of our team members, but to some degree we recruit by talking about what some of the challenges are, and it's a little bit of a litmus test to see if they want to come on the team.
Ah, that's good. Yeah, thank you. Dallin, you're writing something down furiously. What is it?
I just thought that was great advice. I'm going to start implementing and using that. I actually read the Shackleton book a few years ago, and that's just a great thing to think about. But I do have a comment. We recruited an individual to our team. His name's Dan Von Hoff, but he is the Michael Jordan of. Is that even a relevant comment anymore? Who's the?
How about LeBron James?
The LeBron James. It hurts my heart to say that, but I guess he's the LeBron James of cancer drug development. So this individual has put almost 500 new chemical entities first in man. Done the first trial to put them in people, and in fact, one of the drugs he did, the very first person it was an injectable, a chemotherapeutic agent. He injected it into the first patient, and the patient literally fell over and died. So
That doesn't sound good.
That's not good, but this individual also was the one that designed and ran the clinical trials for drugs like gemcitabine, Taxol. These are drugs that sell multi-billion dollars a year. So this guy knows what he's doing and he is the guy in early stage cancer drug development on the clinical side, and very in demand. And what we did with him, money at some point ceases to be the motivation for people. So we really appealed to him with the quality of our science to make a lasting and meaningful difference in the world. And we pay him quite well too, in fact extremely well. But that's not why he joined the team and why he's motivated to help us. It's more about the social mission and the good we can do in the world. He really feels like our science can be transformational in the fight against cancer. So that's how we were able to attract him. And also we've done 2 other small things to just kind of help him get excited about the company and be involved. And one is, this is a really dumb thing, but he travels a lot. We got him one of those black Amex cards that enables him to have status on 2 or 3 airlines and just makes him travel a little bit easier. And occasionally we'll pay the extra $5,000-$6,000 and put him on a private jet to a meeting. Just to, I'm flying to Japan next week. I'm flying coach. So, this is not our corporate culture to spend money, but for him, we do because we want his full involvement. And
he's a game changer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I'd just like to blend a little bit what my companies were very flat, so I didn't have management teams. I went and hired other people. Or invested in other companies. But one of the things that as I work with CEOs right now, and kind of blending what they both said, it's if someone's focused on the what of the business, that's probably not the right person, because you want them focused on the why of the business. And that's what motivates people to really go and make things happen. And so I'd just like to suggest that the things that really turn people on and really bring on A-plus superstars are the why, not the what.
That's great. Now, I think that's why we were able to attract the inventor of the Apple computer, Steve Wozniak, to join a little Utah-based, Salt Lake City-based technology company in 2008. Come on, the inventor of the Apple computer. He was so passionate about the new memory that we had created, storage-based, flash-based memory systems for data centers, that he just was passionate about what we were doing. He could care less about the money. It was funny. I've got a million stories about Woz, but my last one was as I was CEO and I was starting to wind down there as CEO, I brought him into my office in Salt Lake and we were chatting about the future of the company and still enthusiastic about it, et cetera. And I says, you know what, you've been so great to this company, et cetera. I want to give you another $50,000 in stock options. They'll vest over a 4-year period, 25% per year, et cetera. His response was this, and this goes to the passion point. He goes, no, don't give those to me. Give those to your engineers, right? And it's revelatory about what, drove him as an individual, right? It was the why of the business. He didn't need to be there for the money. Anyway, so that's a little bit of a fun story. What do you think? I read here recently the book on finding the next Steve Jobs. It's a great read. It's a fast read. It's written by the man who started Atari, Bushnell, Utah-based guy. He started Atari back in the early 80s, the first video gaming platform. Also started Chuck E. Cheese. And in his book, he talks about these creative types. Do you have any creative types in your organization that you need to kind of tiptoe around and you put them in the room and so forth? What's the value of hiring someone who's really creative but may be non-traditional in their approach to life and things? Dallin, you're smiling. Any thoughts on that? Or?
Yeah, I've spoken too much, so I'll be very quick. But yeah, we have a couple people that we keep in the lab. Their job is in the lab. They don't get to come out of the lab. They don't get to interface with anyone. But they think in a different way than I do. And it's not right or wrong or good or bad. It's just, and they are much more creative and much more scientifically focused. And just they think in a different way. That's the bottom line. And they're not great at all with people. I would hate to have them at a negotiation table because we'll lose before it even starts, et cetera. And so, one of the things we think about at our company all the time is I'm constantly saying, it's a team, not, and we're not going to succeed with 9 shortstops or 9 pitchers.
Right.
The creative person's important, and we just make sure we align the role and the needs of the company with the individual and their personality and skill set, because there's nothing more painful, from my experience, than putting someone in a position or being in a position yourself that you never intended to be in, and you don't have the skills and the passion to succeed in. And so we really try to align talent and motivation and interest with the job, and sometimes the job requires a personality type that you wouldn't want at your dinner party, but you need in your company.
So just a quick comment on that. I think there are all kinds of personality types that require different management, and you need to have different expectations. Sometimes creative people are not super productive, and they're not the first there at work. And so you need to understand when you're working with the different personalities on your team what you expect to get from them. And I found that those that are the most creative, sometimes, this might be a bit of a stereotype, but sometimes they're less traditional in their approach to work, and they can also be tougher to work with. And so you need to figure out what you want to do with your creative people and how you want to work with them. It all boils down to trust. Do you trust that person and their work style, and can you get them to perform at their best? But if you require the creative people to be as productive as the less creative people, you'll probably drive the creative people out of your company. So you have to work very carefully in that regard.
That's a good point. Fred, anything to add there? Okay. Well, listen, it's 2:50, and, I heard that group wrapping up. So I've got a dozen more questions, but I want to hear any other questions that this group might have for our panelists, or any comments or experiences that you've had that might add value. Sure, back here to the right.
When hiring people, I hear that there's a whole lot of disconnect between getting good people and not. And you talked about that for a little bit, and how you talk about how low pay is so that they're passionate. How often have you implemented the contract to hire method to see how you will work with them on a project before you make them a full-time part of the company?
In other words, sign them up as an independent contractor on a month-to-month basis for a period of time before you actually bring them into the company as a full-time employee.
Sometimes you do that.
Sometimes you do that, yeah, when it makes sense. Yeah, my wife has a company, and all of her folks are 1099s, independent contractors, and so forth. It just makes sense for her company and the way she's moving forward. Any other questions? Well, thanks to our panelists. Round of applause for Dallin, Fred, and Tom.